All right, all right, all right. Welcome to Sideboardmtg, and it's another one of our patron-only streams. We're going to be doing coffee time today, but we're not looking at a deck in particular. We're actually going to be looking at cards. The meta has definitely shapened up, and we know the decks to be expecting from those that are net decking. And let's face it, they're going to be someone at every FNM that has a net deck, so you need to know how to beat these decks. So we're gonna be talking about some cards today that are going to increase your win percentages and what decks you can run those cards in. And hopefully this will help give some of you guys a little bit better of an edge against these decks, especially if you know they're going to be played in your meta. So what we're going to do is I'm going to pull up the most diverse list that we've had lately, and that is actually Louisville. So we're gonna be pulling up SCG Standard Classic Standard from Louisville, which was on 5/20/2018. That's just 2 days ago when the results came in. We're gonna look at all the top 16 decks there, and kind of go from there, and just kind of talk about what cards you could run in your deck to help increase your win percentage, or what strategies are best at beating these decks. So without further ado, I want to go ahead and introduce James and Zaxadillo, and we'll jump into some coffee time. I definitely want to give a shout out to Albatross, Justin Clay, and Magic Hefe, who are already in chat. Thank you guys for waiting on me. We was trying to get Lincoln settled in there so we could have a good coffee time. So let's talk about these decks. I mean, I've pulled them up here on TCG Player, and let me jump over and get the guys in.
So
James, Zaxadillo, what's up, guys?
Hey, Eric, how's it going?
I'm doing well.
Great. That is great to hear. Um, we're gonna keep the chat to just three people today, so that we don't have too many people talking over each other. I think that three is a better number. We may end up going to four in the future, but for right now, I think three is a better number, and we're gonna try to go with this. So, um, what do you guys think about the results from Louisville or Louisville?
I haven't seen him.
Oh, look at them.
Okay.
I did look at them the other
I need
day.
to I need to look this up.
Oh
But
goodness. Oh goodness. Well, I'm sure when you pull them up, you're going to be familiar with the decks. I mean, it's nothing you haven't seen before. It's just which one took which place. We're looking at blue white control with first place. Second place was mono red aggro. Third and fourth place were blue white control. Fourth place, or sorry, fifth place was mono green aggro, but splashing black and blue. So Sultai aggro, and then more red black aggro, a blue black improvised deck, a black white aggro deck, which is actually a black white vehicles deck, and then some mid range decks, more aggro. One copy of Approach got into the top eight, and it's been so long since we've seen Approach actually win a top eight, and that's kind of got me curious a little bit. And then of course we've got one green black Constrictor, and some more black white and blue white control and mono red. So there is an interesting mono red aggro list that I want to look at. It looks like it's splashed white and green. Do I think that this will be like a major part of the meta? Probably not, considering like all the other splashing decks. It doesn't have anything really. Like, why are they having this listed as white and green? It's
It's
23
so wrong.
mountains. What? It's
white and green
23,
20 minutes.
right?
That's
Color
weird.
symbols. Something's wrong. TCG players messed something up.
Well,
On crop champion.
you're looking on TCG Player, not I'm on Goldfish. That's
Yeah, I pulled
TCG.
it
Oh,
up on Goldfish.
they pulled up on crop champion instead of on crop crasher. So
Yeah, that does it.
that's what did it. Okay, all right. I was curious at what this mono red was that splashed. So the same may be the case for the mono green, but we'll check that out in a minute. Well, guys, like, what is your number one sideboard card right now? I mean, everybody knows what mine
Number
is.
one
Yeah,
sideboard
that you
card.
just have to have in every deck that can run it. Like, let's talk about that before we go anywhere else.
All right. This is gonna be a long conversation.
We got about an hour, so
Good.
let's do
All
this.
right. So we got what, two copies of blue-white control in the top eight. So we need to be able to deal with that. We need to be able to deal with some variations of aggro decks with like what, four in the top eight, and then
Yeah.
also there was a blue-white gift, which is strange, and then a blue-black improvised. So those two are kind of there, but not so hot. Um, Mine probably, I'd probably just go with authority of the consoles.
How does authority help you against blue white control?
It doesn't help me with blue-white control, but it helps me with mono-red aggro. It helps me with mono-green stompy. It helps me with blue-white gift. It helps me with blue-black improvise. Like, it helps me with everything except blue-white control.
Okay, so if you're saying that your number one card is a card that helps you with all the other matchups, how do you feel
Yeah.
your decks or what you normally play fares up against the blue white control decks? Do you
No,
normally
the rest
play?
of my sideboard is meant for those.
Understood, understood.
I
I
just
just thought
I
maybe
just
your
like
main
that
deck
card
was
so much.
a little bit better suited to fight control, which is hard to
My
do.
my main deck is generally good against mid-range decks. I could tune it for aggro or control, but my main decks are generally good for mid-range decks, and then I want to bring in authority for the aggro decks, but the rest of it is generally geared towards control because I'm not very good at building against control in game one.
Understood. Well, I actually like Authority. I think Authority is in a really good spot right now, especially making creatures enter the battlefield tapped so they can't use those creatures to crew Hearts of Kirin. Heart of Kirin is a really big part of the meta right now. Has been since it was printed, ever since the Copter got banned. But Heart of Kirin is just a really good card, and it's a card that we do need to worry about. So Authority does help hedge against the Hearts and the haste creatures and such. So I can definitely see Authority being a good one. Justin Clay says duress. Here's a simple question: how do you shut control down? Um, James, what
Well,
is your number one piece of tech?
well, I basically it depends really. So if I'm playing against, if it's I take out a lot of my removal on the main deck. I keep in Vraska's Contempt, so I bring in another Vraska's Contempt. Basically bring in Duress, I bring in Bestiaries, I bring in another Brash, Chandra, Angrath, Nissa, Carnage Tyrants,
So
a
you're
lot.
you're definitely trying to tax their non-creature counter.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
okay, because I'm guessing you're figuring that against you, which I'll go ahead and say that, like you're normally playing Jund Dinos right now. So
Yeah.
against you, I guess have to keep in their essence scatters and things like that. And if you're already running main board of braids and brontodons and things like that, I assume you're just not worried about aggro.
Yeah. My biggest concern actually in game one is drawing three fatal pushes, which sometimes happens. And I'm like, oh no, oh, I look at your handy, like, I've got two fatal pushes in this. I've got some turn one black mana, I've got two on green mana, I've got some stuff I can cast and that. And I'm like, oh, they play a blue right land. I'm like, no, and then it's like, oh, bollocks.
Justin Clay says, do you hoard cards and play multiple cards a turn? How do you deal with settle when you know they have it? And what can you do to get the advantage? Um,
When they've got settled. The issue is that if you've got certain creatures on the battlefield, yeah, you have to tax settle. So if I've got some threats out, I leave threats on the battlefield. Um, Generally, just leave them there. Don't attack or anything unless you've got a point where you want them to settle. Because there will be points where you have to force them to settle. You see, by dealing them enough damage that it's significant to the life total. But you're holding threats back into your hand, and when they deal with those threats, that's when you can play your Chandra or your Angrath and things, and then that punishes them.
okay, so you do force the settle. You have to swing enough
Yeah,
into it
yeah,
that they're
absolutely.
going
Yeah, the
to
stuff,
use it.
I'm playing big stuff, so one Carnage Tyrant is going to force a settle.
Understood. And yeah, that will definitely force a settle. So you basically got to put enough of a threat on something like Teferi or something that they have to settle. Um,
Yeah.
Magic Hefe says, I would like to hear everyone go to sideboard cards based on color. Like if I'm white, authority, black, duress, etc. We're actually going to do that. I was just wanting to get, like some of the initial takes on the guys here. What so let me go ahead and give mine. My personal favorite answer right now, and most people know this, is Sorcerer Spyglass. The Spyglass is absolutely phenomenal against most matchups. The red-green matchup is normally your worst matchup to actually call or to have a Sorcerer Spyglass, but you still don't have. It's never a dead card. You can normally call a Chandra or a Karn if they have those. So like there are some options there against even the worst matchup for the Sorcerer Spyglass. You can call Brontodon if you're in a deck that actually has enchantments that you don't want them to remove. So, like, if you Sorcerer Spyglass call Brontodon, Brontodon will never actually be able to activate its ability to destroy Sorcerer Spyglass, which at that point you can actually play against like play your cast outs and things like that, or your seal aways if you are one of those type decks. What about mainboard Lost Legacy? I would only
Well,
say mainboard Lost Legacy if you had more than 50% of your meta playing playing
Approach.
or playing approach or blue white control. Lost Legacy is a really good way to just call Teferi. It's a good way to call, approach as a second sun. So it does end those. So black's got better answers than most. White has pretty good answers. So based on the same principle as my spyglass. Um, okay,
but
so
bearing in mind, there's one big upside to Spyglass versus Lost Legacy. Lost Legacy, you have to play it, then name the card. Sorcerer Spyglass, you play it, where they reveal the hand, and then you can name a card, and that card doesn't have to be in their hand.
right, so you're never going blind with Sorcerer's Spyglass. Lost Legacy will remove cards from their deck, but if you're on turn two and they go search for Azcanta and you go to Fairy and all of a sudden you realize your opponent didn't have $120 to spend on his Teferis and he's just running a classic blue-white approach deck, you might be in trouble. Um, and now you've wasted a card against a deck where card advantage matters more than anything else. So at least if you Sorcerer Spyglass, you can look at that hand. That peak is very, very important. I am
Yeah,
100% on that peak.
yeah.
Let's pull up this winning blue-white control deck, and we'll just kind of go through colors and talk about which cards in those colors could help you the most. If you were running these decks or these colors, like what cards do you need to help fight against blue-white control? This is a pretty standard build. We've been seeing a lot of this particular one. 4 Teferis, 1 Gideon. It's got some blink of the eyes. It's got cast outs. It's got commit to memory. Play set of disallow, fumigate, seal away, search for Azcanta, resettle the wreckages, couple syncopates, just plenty of counter, board wipe, counter, board wipe, counter. So personally, I think what fights these decks the best is you need every creature in your deck to present some type of threat. You can't be playing creatures that aren't very threatening. So if you tap out, or you use your mana to place something on the battlefield that's not a threat, then you've given them an entire turn to do what they need to do. What would you use to beat this blue-white if you were, let's say you were blue-white? What would your mirror match tech be?
What do I know?
Um, more Gideons.
More
Stop,
Gideons.
stop.
More Gideons. Um, like he's not running a, or approach at the second sun, so like you could chuck one of those in there.
Understood.
Other than that, like there's the possibility of boarding in more threats, but I don't see why you would. Because they always have their fumigates and settles and whatever else.
Right.
Like
Um,
Gideon.
if you're on the play, I like History of Benalia coming in.
Yeah,
He's
it
got
seems okay.
Sorcerer's Spyglass here. Seems like a good card. I think you're going to take out like most of your removal. So
Hmm.
I can definitely see Sorcerer's Spyglass, History of Benalia, the other Gideon.
Syncopate, not syncopate. Sorry,
Syncopate's great. Glad that
I
it's
meant
finally
lead away
synced
rather
up.
than syncopate. Is what I was trying to say.
Um, I like having the. Let me fix my camera. We're way too high. Anyway,
But
I
the one thing I will say is that this would be a very, very painful match to go
yes. Oh
against the
goodness.
mirror. Absolutely bloody painful.
The one reason I wouldn't want to play this deck right now is because of Fear of the Mirror. Um, the Fear of the Mirror here would just be devastating. It's going to be this long, drawn out who can force the threats. Your opponent only really has to counter 4 Teferis and 1 Gideon, and you can't lose or you can't win. Like main board win cons are few and far between. The Ipnu Rivulets is one of the best techs against the mirror match. Being able to mill your opponent out before they get the opportunity to, use the Teferi cycle to keep themselves like from being milled out, or being able to they do their put Teferi on top of their library and then you Ipnu Rivulet and just go ahead and mill it away. That's also a really good tactic. So a lot of times you're going to actually have to save a disallow for Ipnu Rivulet, or you're going to have to save like Field of Ruins or something like that in the mirror. And that's if you're talking about like one of your major answers to the mirror is I'm just going to wait till he's only got 1 card left in his deck and I'm going to mill him. Man, those are going to be some long games. Oh,
Oh yeah, absolutely.
but this is the strategy that they're using. So we are seeing Ipnu Rivulets enter these decks again. So, um, what if you were playing red? What would your best answer for this deck be? Um, just be
Oh,
Kill
fast.
be
them.
speed,
Just be faster.
right?
Yeah,
Just
Just
kill them.
pure speed.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So let's say you were some other aggressive deck. Pure speed would be the way to go. So when you're sideboarding, anything that would slow your deck down would probably be a no-no.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Um, Understood. Um,
yeah,
what
absolutely. So the
Unless
mono
it's
red deck.
duress.
unless it's duress or something like fragmentize or something like that, so that you can still play threats and have removal.
Hmm.
Understood.
Yeah, yeah. But duress is only going to help so much.
Yeah.
And
Correct.
actually, how you time that duress as well is super important.
I like a turn 4 or a turn 3 duress myself. Um, I'm a big fan of that. Go ahead and get my board set up as early as possible in those aggressive decks, and then when I'm getting ready to swing into that settle, let's go ahead and duress them. Either make them tap down to the point where they can't settle, because I'm going to take it away from them, or like so they have to counter the duress, and then I get my swing in anyway, or you know they don't have the counter for the duress, and you just take the settle. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
So that's I like that strategy. So if you like have um, you're gonna need like cheap removal for that. So spell pierce or duress works really good for those. Admiral's orders, I think a lot of people were playing. So
Mm.
Yeah, it's also if you look at the red deck, it's they're playing what one copy of Fight with Fire in the main, um, and
versus
also in
Lyra,
the start, and that's pardon.
versus Lyra.
Yeah, but it's not just that. It could actually be not too bad against some other decks as well. Okay, the kicker cost is super expensive, but 10 damage to the face is quite significant.
Right, but 3 mana deal 5 damage to a creature is
Target
also
creature.
very
Yeah,
very
yeah,
significant.
yeah.
So I was I was watching the videos from I think it was the last GP, and the guy who won did not run Bomat Courier in his deck, and he was talking about how against blue white that he thinks that it had made his deck much weaker in that matchup, even though he did get lucky, or he says that he got lucky and won that in the finals. But he was like, I definitely, if I thought that there would be this much blue white, he said I would have played Bomat Courier. So I think in the red strategies, if you can get away with Bomat Courier, it gets out very early. A lot of times they don't want to use something like a Seal Away on it because you can back that up with something like a Kari Zev or a Goblin Chain Whirler, which becomes much more of a threat. So
Yeah,
one of the best ways to hedge against those is early creatures that provide card draw. So like when I was playing with my Soul Tide deck, Glint Sleeve Siphoner was an absolutely phenomenal card against the blue-white control. It just gave me plenty of card advantage. I think in the green-red decks, Lifecrafter's Bestiary is going to give you a lot of value because once you land that Bestiary, you're going to get to cycle or scry at the beginning of your upkeep. Every time you cast a creature, whether or not it gets countered, you're still going to get that card value off of it. I think that cards like Bomat Courier, Glint Sleeve Siphoner, Lifecrafter's Bestiary, which that card runs really well when you have more creatures in your deck, more threats in your deck. So, like, if you're running a deck that can use those things, I do think that like card draw and value is absolutely terrific. Are those answers that are good against blue white control good against a mono red deck? Absolutely not. I'm actually taking my Glint Sleeve Siphoners out versus Goblin Chain Whirler decks. Just not going to worry about it in game one. I would rather be able to have at least a fighting chance against the blue white control decks than, and normally I have enough removal or my creatures can fight a fair fight against most of the aggro decks. So those are three cards I also think that are in three different colors that I think are really, really good against blue-white control. Thrashing Brontodon is really good if you're in blue. I mean, if you're in green. If you're in blue, the best thing against blue-white control is just simple good negate. If you're in white, of course, like cast outs, Ixalan's bindings. If you happen to get an Ixalan's binding on a cast out or on a Teferi, getting an Ixalan's binding on a Teferi or a Sorcerer's Spyglass on a Teferi, and then like casting out or Ixalan's binding their cast out is pretty much the game over. Like they can't
yeah, yeah.
come back from that. You've locked them out. So those are the five color choices that like the cards I would bring in those colors, and Sorcerer's Spyglass would be in absolutely every deck if I was trying to fight blue white control. Um, I know I talked a lot right there, so thoughts for you guys?
I mean, personally, I wouldn't play blue white right now. Like, it's a good deck, but it only has so many win cons, and if they can get rid of those, you're just dead, right?
I think Esper's a better option.
Yeah, like if you're gonna play control, play the mono black deck or play like Esper or something.
Oh, the mono black though is too easy to beat.
Mono black is silly easy to beat.
Yeah, it's so easy to beat. It's
Yeah.
just not a concern.
Fill
Yeah,
the
you've
fill
got
the
some
ruin
games
in your
that
deck,
get
and you're
ahead of
good.
you. But I'll be honest with you,
Really.
against the mono black control, the decks I play are just very heavily favoured.
The mono black control deck's actually like it's also like a mono black mid range. I mean, most of the time it's running Glint Sleeve Siphoners and Aetherborns, and it's running
It runs
Gontis.
Siphoner sometimes. It runs Siphoner sometimes, runs Gonti sometimes.
I haven't seen a deck a mono black one yet that doesn't run Gonti.
Mine doesn't.
Okay, that's you.
But yeah, it's me. Basically, the one that I've been running, it runs what 7 different Planeswalker removal spells and 2 Bells and Locks and 2 Josu Vests. Like it can come back from things, and it has some card draw at least. So it's not in a bad position right now, at least.
What is your card draw in the mono black deck?
Card draw is Bells and Luck, Karn, and then Sideboard, some Bloodfasts.
Okay, so you are running the Karn version. Bloodfast.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, that was a card that I definitely didn't mention. But as always, card advantage is one of the best ways to defeat a good control deck. So
Hmm.
landing something like an Argyle's Bloodfast requires an answer, especially against a control deck that is not pressuring your life total. You can pretty much dump your entire life total into an Argyle's Bloodfast, and that normally results in about 9 cards drawn. So and that's if you don't have something like a Aetherborn swinging. So
Hmm.
Justin Clay says that he thinks most 1 toughness creatures are in trouble with Whirler. They are. Absolutely, they are. You're going to have the problem with Chain Whirler. You're going to have people playing that and just destroying your Bomat Couriers. They're going to be destroying your Earthshaker Kinras, your Glint Sleeve Siphoners, your Champion of Wits. Like all of these things are going to be destroyed. Personally, against like something like Chain Whirler, I think that Thrashing Brontodon is like the best thing you can play against those decks.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, he's great. So,
It's just such a good card. Yeah.
so is there anything else that we would really like? You just need to know when it comes time to fight that blue white control deck. Like what what else do you got? Like what tidbits do you guys have for fighting the blue white control deck? Even you can mention your deck and this is how you do it, and let them kind of get an idea from how you would do it from that from your deck.
Just in terms of attacking, like if they have 4 open mana, generally if you can attack with 2 creatures, because they could either have seal away or settle, and you don't want them to seal away you if you only attack with 1, but you don't want them to settle you, so just like punch them with 2 or 3.
It depends how big your threats are as well.
Well, yeah,
Um,
but like you don't want to
generally,
lose everything.
generally, generally, you know that if you play a planeswalker quite early on and they can't answer that, that's a problem for them. If they cast out that planeswalker, you can just play another one.
Yeah.
It depends what you're playing. So the thing is, you see, I played 2 mainboard Chandras because she's just such a good card. I've always liked Chandra as a card. So um, you're going to draw Chandra eventually, but it really depends on what you have in your own hand. So game one for me is either a win or a loss. It depends if I've got a really good opening hand, yeah, I've got a good chance. If I've got really good 3 drops, 4 drops, coming to 5 drops, 6 drops, that works out really well for me. So it means you can pressure their life total very quickly with, and one creature that's pretty good at that, if they can't counter it, is like Regisaur Alpha, because even if that's coming down, they're still taking 3 damage on the token. And it's just taking their life total down. And then game two, it becomes a lot. The matchup becomes easier, but it's still, if you land a turn 3 Beastry against the blue white control deck, you're going to win that game most likely.
So you think
Unless you have
Bestry is
really
just
bad luck.
that good?
If you've got, because you're getting a scry each turn, yeah, you play any creature, a branch walker, a small creature, that's the aim here. You draw a card. They are very unlikely to counter a branch walker. You get it down, and then you've got the ability where you look at the card at the top of your line, you can graveyard it, or you can keep it. You see, and then you go again. You've got another card that you want to. So you're just trying. So you're just constantly drawing an extra card a turn, or 2 cards a turn. It's a lot for them to deal with, and
And
they're
technically, you
gonna
have the option
settle.
to see 3 cards per turn. Like the Scry, you could pitch that on the bottom, draw another one, play a card, get another one.
Absolutely,
So
and the things
3 a
like
turn's great.
when they fumigate things like, say, your Carnage Tyrant, for example, that's where Nissa's quite good, because Nissa can bring back that Tyrant,
Okay.
or she can bring back that Chandra that's countered, or bring back that Beastry that was countered, for example.
Right. That was one of the reasons I had her in my Sultai deck was because I wanted a way to get back my Spyglass, and I wanted a way to get back my Journey to Eternity. But I never ended up bringing her in. I just never had a good reason to. For the Horde, what's up, man? Um, so I agree with almost everything you said there. I actually I don't know any part of it that I disagree with. Like including the idea to run Regisaur Alpha over something like Glorybringer. Um, Against something like the mono red decks, or even against the red black decks and the white black decks and things. Glorybringer is a great card, and in most of those situations, I think he might even be better than Regisaur Alpha, because you get to remove your choice of most of their creatures. Like, most of their creatures can't stop it. A lot of times you can put enough pressure that they have to block with something like a Heart of Quran, and or Heart of Kieran, ever how you want to say it. So I think Glorybringer's better in a red black meta, but in a blue white meta, I am really starting to agree with the Regisaur Alpha decision. So that might be something that people want to look into in the future. If you have the option to be running either or, think of your meta and go that route.
It's not only that though. You see, it's also the thing is the Regisaur you see poses a threat, and the way that I kind of think of it is that I've got one Regisaur out. Very rarely, unless I have a complete opening, they've got no cards in hand, will I attack with that Regisaur Alpha. It just means that every single threat that comes down, a Death Gold Scavenger comes down with Regisaur, you eat one of their cards, it becomes a 4/3. You go to combat, eat one of their cards, it's now a 5/4 that same turn with haste. And if the token's still alive, that is what's that? That's like that's 8 damage. So that's a
Right.
significant question to the life total.
So you're flat out saying like that's a good way to push through the settle the wreckages and things like that. It's like, I'm going to eat two of your
Absolutely,
cards.
it's
You're going to
awesome
give
to
me
use
two
them.
lands. I'm also going to be pushing 7 points worth of damage towards you, or 8 points worth of damage towards you. So turning every card into a threat is a strategy you're taking.
Yeah, but it's not just a threat; it's an instant threat. It means it comes down and it's straight away going to pressure the life total, which is what mono red is kind of doing. But of course, you need to get to that mana. So when
Understood.
they settle early, it's not the end of the world because um, you're going to get some land.
Right. Which allows you to just get to your Carnage Tyrants and other things
Exactly.
easier. So yeah, I can see that. Another card that I was going to mention is a card that is getting some use in the green black constrictor list and things like that, and a lot of them are still splashing blue just for the Hadana's Climb. I find that Hadana's Climb is a great card. It turns creatures like Merfolk Branchwalker, or something like a Jade Light Ranger into a true threat. Where if
Yeah,
they do get the option to flip this, at that point, the blue white control deck has to worry about absolutely every creature that swings at them. So cards like Hadana's Climb are really good, and just because of that same principle that you were mentioning, you're turning every card into a threat. In your case, they are instant, but in the case of a flipped Hadana's Climb, almost all of them are lethal. So I definitely agree with the threatening answer. So, like Justin Clay and those guys were asking earlier, like, is it just one of those things? How do you get through that settle? You have to just provide a threat that is strong enough that they have to settle it. In your case, Justin, something like Lyra would definitely swing by herself and probably call for a settle the wreckage. Um,
absolutely. Yeah.
yeah, like you would be able to leave all your knights and things like that back, and let Lyra just trade that card for card to guarantee that you get that settle out of their hand. So I do think that you could get away with something like that.
It depends how big your threats are as well. You have involved as well. That's the thing. You see, you just have to. The way I kind of think of it, you have to have enough damage there that it's going to be significant to their life total. When it's significant to their life total, they have to sell the wreckage there. So, example, if you've got some other creatures out, but you've still got a Carnage Time on the board, that's quite good. You don't need to attack with that Carnage Time because other than Fumigate and Settle, they've got no way of dealing with that Carnage Time. And if they play Lyra, um, Carnage Time is going to go through the Lyra. Yeah, they're going to gain some life. It could be a positive life swing for them, but it's still going to take the Lyra out.
Absolutely. I mean, that is that. I mean, Carnage Tyrant is the epitome of what we're talking about. Like, when we're talking about present a threat that has to be settled, there's no better threat than Carnage Tyrant. So if you're in green, just run some Carnage Tyrants. You're going to have a much better matchup against blue-white. If you're don't have the option for Carnage Tyrants, though, you do need to worry about, are the cards in my deck going to present enough of a threat that each one of them can protect another one by sheer like threat alone. And what I mean by that is you can play a Lana War Elf, and if they don't kill it on turn one and say they top deck the answer for it, by the time that you use it, you could possibly have played something like a Steel Leaf Champion down, and now at that point, the Lana War Elf is no longer like worth dealing with. At that point, you've created so much, like you've created such a more threatening target over here that I gotta let you have that elf. Now I have to find my cast down or whatever to deal with this, or I'm just going to die to it. So that's another thing that you can do, is present more and more powerful threats as the game goes on, and that's kind of what we call a curve. So working your way up a good solid curve is another way to present a good threat against blue-white control and pretty much any deck. I mean, that's just Magic in general. I mean, if you need to protect the Lana War Elf, you make sure that the Lana War Elf is casting something that will protect it on a sure
Yeah,
sure.
but also you're going to consider when you're playing a card like Carnage Tyrant, yeah, you, although theoretically speaking, you can say you can go into any deck that plays green. However, you do need to make sure that your deck is going to curve out properly and get to that 6 mana in time and that double green to be able to cast Carnage Tyrant. Otherwise, it's just a dead card.
Right, you don't want to stick it in like a 22 land deck.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to be holding it, man, going, man, I just need 2 more lands. You're just not going to get there. Or you're going to get to hold your Land of War Elf on the battlefield until you get to like 5 mana total, and then they're going to like finally say, oh, okay, now it's time to deal with this. So, Carnage Tyrant, yeah, I wouldn't just stick him in anything for the Horde Ghost, but I run 22 land. And Pirate's Pillage.
But aren't you playing? Did you say you're playing? No, it was Justin Play that plays Lyra.
Justin Clay plays a black white like a black white deck. Knights, cards like that, spot removal. Are you still playing the trials, Justin? Um, I know we've got the cartouches. The last time I played around with your deck, we had the cartouches in there. But are you still playing with the trials? Because I think the trials are probably not at their best right now. You're still torn. Okay, so pretty much black white good stuff is what Justin Clay is playing with. So um, he's an Orzhov mage, I think. Every time he's submitted a deck, it was black white. So I would say he's playing. I mean, honestly, Justin, you have like all the best cards in Magic right now in Standard, as far as removal and answers go. Um, it's
Yeah,
hard to stop you, dude.
Shalai is a good one.
Right, Shala is really good. They can't settle you if Shala is on the battlefield.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, I mean that's real. A lot of people don't think about it, but Siren Storm Tamer is a really good card right now. Siren Storm Tamer can stop a Settle the Wreckage, so that's a really good card. Like just you're going to need some way to answer the settle without them settling you, or to force them to settle only what you want them to settle. So um, I think that's about the most we can like beat this horse. I think it's already dead. We know that you got to present a threat. You got to be holding cards that can deal with Teferi. You still need an answer against approach. You need some way to kill a Lyra, something like that. That is a large creature. So I definitely think that those are all things that we need to think about when it comes to the black white decks. You wanted to go Esper with that black
What do you
white
want to
deck.
splash blue for, though? That's the question.
Negate.
What do you want to splash blue for?
Answer is always negate, right? I mean, I'm waiting on him, but the Scarab God. There you go. Yeah, right. Um, I'm waiting on him, but I think the answer is like always. Why do you splash blue? Negate. Oh, why are you blue black? The Scarab God. Like that. pretty straightforward. We'll see what his thoughts are on why he would want to go blue in his Knights deck.
See, going blue in an Esper deck has some advantages, but it has some disadvantages as well. It makes the deck considerably slower. However, it will potentially give it more late game power, especially with the options in the gate, but also the cycling lands will make a big difference for it as well.
Absolutely, the cycling lands, just being able to put 2 sets of cycling lands in the deck would actually be great. So, yes, for the Horde, Esper has a solid mana base right now. It really,
Yep.
really does. In some situations, I think because of this cycling lands, some of the 3-color decks, Esper, Bant, Teamer is not one of them, so it's Esper, Bant,
Jund
Jun.
as well.
No, no, no. It doesn't have 2 sets of cycling lands, does it?
Yeah, Jund does. Yeah, it's Canyon
Oh,
Slough.
it does. It sure does.
Yeah,
Oh, wow.
yeah.
Yeah. So all the colors that have 2 sets of cycling lands have really, really good late game possibilities. And running 26 lands in those decks, it's just not a bad idea at all. That's another thing that I have to mention to you guys about playing against these control decks and stuff. You're going to need to play multiple threats per turn. You're going to need to be able to have the mana to be able to cast those multiple threats per turn. So you're going to want to keep your mana curve as low as possible while still being a very threatening deck and having the right answers. But you're also going to want to make sure that you're freeing up enough space to actually run lands to cast your spells. Blue-white control is not going to miss land drops unless things are going horribly bad for them. They're not going to miss land drops on up until turn 6 and 7 and 8. At that which point they probably have so much of a draw engine going on, they're still not going to miss land drops. So I definitely think that make sure that you guys are running enough lands in your decks. No less than 24 or 25, maybe even 26 if you're running a control or a slower build yourself. So blue
It depends what you have
flyers.
to find out. But as Justin was saying just here, yeah, I think, to be honest, Justin, if you was trying to run Esper, trying to be aggro with Esper is probably not necessarily ideal with regards to the mana base. It's just not fast enough.
Right, because your mana base is actually going to come in tapped quite a bit. You're
That's
normally
why.
okay with that in those 3-color decks because you're planning on being much slower. If you are trying to be faster, I will agree that you should streamline it as much as possible. I mean, it is very hard to have a mana base that is more streamlined than this mono red right here. 23 mountains, 2 scavenger grounds. Even mono red here is running 25 lands, guys. Okay, like that has
See
got to be
now,
pointing at, like that has got to tell you guys something. The deck tops out at 4 converted mana cost and is running 25 lands. Put the lands in your decks. You can't win if you can't play your spells. Go ahead.
yeah.
Go ahead. Take the mic for a minute.
What was I going to say? I forgot. So the thing is, let's talk about land. Yeah, the one thing is that think of it this way as well: is that the black red deck, yeah, although it has some really good late game, it is not as fast as the mono red, but it will hold up very well against the mono red and things because that red black mana base slows it down a lot, and it means that it's a easier deck for many mid range decks to beat than mono red. Because mono red, the worst thing is when the Bomat Courier, Earthshaker Kenra, and turn 3 Armcock Crasher. Are they playing Armcock Crasher on the list at all? Oh, they're not. Thank God. Yeah. Anyway, yeah, is annoying, and it's a good draw. It's a really good draw for them. It's fun for them, but it's not good for you when you're still on 2 land and you've just taken quite a bit of damage already.
Well, let's move on and talk about that black red deck a little bit. We're talking about their land base and how it is, slower than the mono red deck. One of the things that makes the black red deck as powerful as it is because of unlicensed disintegration. Unlicensed disintegration is an absolutely phenomenal card. This card is like the card to worry about against most decks, or against this deck, like they're not taking this card out of their sideboard or out of their main board if you have pretty much anything. Like if you have any creatures at all for them to target, this is the last piece of removal they do remove. We have seen some of the white decks starting to put in Knight of Grace in their sideboards, and that is to hedge against a few cards, and Unlicensed Disintegration is one of those. So being able to just have that hexproof from Unlicensed Disintegration, to have hexproof from Fatal Push and Vraska's Contempt, those are all really, really good cards as well. So that does not help you against Magma Spray or Abrade, but hey, you can't win all battles there, right? This deck has a ton of card draw. So like James was saying earlier, that the deck does have a lot of power and a lot of staying power as the game continues. Walking Ballista, Soulscar Mage, these are really cheap to cast spells. Scrap Heap Scrounger is really a recursive. Rekindling Phoenix, just a pain in the neck to get rid of if you're not running something like a Seal Away or something like that. PNLR, the bodies are great. That's really good card against like the mirror matches and against the mono red decks. When you think of PNLR, you need to think of the same reasoning that is behind something like Whirler or Virtuoso. You're going to pay 3 mana for one body, but you're going to get 2 bodies, and one of them is going to have some flying, so it's going to give you a little bit of blocking action there. Chain Whirler, do we even need to talk about Chain Whirler other than how do you stop from dying to Chain Whirler? And then Glorybringer, of course, is a great card. And if you're not running green, then and you are running red, then Glorybringer is still a great card. 4 Glorybringers, 24 lands is still a mean deck. It can win. Like I've thought about doing that. Mono red, 24 mountains, 4 Glorybringers, 4 Chandra, 4 Karn. Fill the rest with whatever you want. What could we do? It would probably be mean. It'd probably still be a mean deck. But how do you hedge against this, or how do you increase your percentages against these red-black vehicles decks? Abrade?
Well, take a look at the. I've just posted up a list on the Discord. Yeah.
Okay.
Bring this up because this is an example of what I'm using to deal with a meta. It's not to look at the deck; it's just to kind of give examples in there.
Okay. So you're running cards like Fatal Push, Abrade, and Thrashing Brontodon.
Yeah. 4 main board Abrade, 3 Fatal Push.
You do know that they're like. Do you even realize there's a tier 1 deck in the meta that's called Vehicles? Like, have you even has it even startled you at all? Like, that's a tier 1 deck, right? Like.
Yeah, it doesn't bother me.
Yeah, I didn't figure it would. I mean, you have like all the answers in the world to it. Heart of Kirin, well, we'll Fatal Push that. Oh, we'll Unlicensed Disintegration your creature. No, I don't think so. We're gonna play this artifact. Let's kill that. I'm gonna Goblin Chain Whirler you. Well, I'm blocking with Brashing Throntodon, and then you're just gonna like kill a Heart of Kirin in the process. Yeah, it seems that you have. The rest of us are fighting a red-black aggro deck, right?
Yeah, I get that, yeah.
Yeah. So these are all great answers. If you're losing to red-black aggro, he's in 3 different colors, and these are all 3 terrific answers for the reasons we just gave to defeat the red-black aggro decks. Is Karn against blue-white control good against blue-white control? If you can resolve the Karn, yes, Karn is good against blue-white control. Down-ticking Karn is a good way to put a threat onto the battlefield if you already have your Karn out. It's very hard for them to answer a down-tick from Karn. You do need to worry a little bit about them bouncing your Karn and tucking your Karn back away with their Teferi, but anytime that you can get their Teferi to down-tick, you've probably done something. One of the biggest wins for them is to uptick Teferi enough to get the ultimate, which they do very often, and then they just pull from tomorrow and Armageddon.
See, now, personally, I don't play Karn, and it's not because I don't really think Karn's a good card, because that's not what I'm saying. I just don't think Karn is actually optimal for as many decks. As person that mono red deck, I'd rather play 4 Chandra rather than the 2 Karn, because Chandra's giving you cards and she's giving you what Chandra's 3 turns and then she's at 7 or 3 turns and she can ultimate, and that's game, generally. So they have to deal with Chandra. When Karn, you can leave it a little. Yeah, it's going to give you some cards. It's going to create some little. It's going to create some guys that get bigger, if providing you're playing those artifacts. And I suppose the mono red deck or red black deck is playing enough artifacts to make Karn quite viable.
No, but I mean, you play the second artifact, or you down tick Karn the second time, you've got 2/2/2s. The third time you've got 3/3/3s. I mean, Karn can do a lot there, especially if they're not trying to deal with it, because they're just like, I'm just going to Teferi and uptick and hold my mana here and draw cards. It is a way to continue to put threats on the battlefield, even if you're only swinging for 2 at their life total or at their Teferi each turn. It's normally not that bad. If Karn spits out 2 tokens and they have to use removal on any of those tokens and you still have your Karn laying around, you have definitely starting to win that attrition war. And fighting against control is a game of attrition. Which deck can continue to put threats down or answer threats until someone finishes the game. However, the best way to beat an opponent is always going to be to remove their life total, put it at 0. So it's one of the reasons I like this Regisaur Alpha take on fighting these control decks. You're pushing so much threat that you're actually getting some damage in, putting them into panic mode, making them spend draw spells when they're wanting to spend other spells, like keeping them from gaining so much control of the battlefield is going to be absolutely terrific. But we keep coming back to the blue-white control deck, and because it is like the worst matchup for so many decks out there. Put the Sorcerer's Spyglasses in your deck, guys. Run 3 in the sideboard. You can even remove your crooks if you need to. Remember, Sorcerer's Spyglass can do a number of things. You can call Azcanta the Sunken Ruin. Do not call Search for Azcanta. Your opponent will let you say search for Azcanta. They will grab a piece of paper and write it down and go, this is the card you want? Okay, I'm putting it right here. So you cannot, it will do absolutely nothing, but they will know you called search for Azcanta, not Azcanta the Sunken Ruin. That will happen.
You've also got to make sure as well that it's activated abilities.
Correct.
I have had a number of times, and I don't know why somebody would do this, people played it and named a braid from my hand.
I've had people name Glorybringer.
And I'll be honest with you, and I was like, okay, I don't need this abrade right now. I'm going to abrade your Sorcerer's Spyglass.
Just to show you.
Yeah, and then the guy's like, what did you, why was that? I'm like, it's not a triggered or an activated ability.
Right. Triggered abilities, it won't stop a triggered ability, which is like the front of Search for Azcanta. Those are triggered abilities. Activated abilities, however, it will. So if you have a graveyard you need to protect because you're playing, blue-white God-Pharaoh's Gift. If you have a graveyard you need to protect, you can actually call cards like Scavenger Grounds. Now they cannot activate the ability to sacrifice the Scavenger Grounds. If you have a and that's something you're not going to do with Lost Legacy, guys, right? Like, you're not going to Lost Legacy their Scavenger Grounds out of their deck. If you know they have, like, Crook of Condemnation, you can play the Sorcerer's Spyglass. And the thing is once they let you peek, they do not get a priority until after you've called your card. So if they ever show you your hand and you go, okay, Crook, they can't tap Crook in response to you saying the name. So once you actually get to look at their hand, then at that point it's over. They don't get a priority to put something else on the stack. So if you call something like Crook or Sorcerer's Spy or some of their, like the Scarab God or something like that, they're not going to get to activate it in response.
Yeah, because it's already resolved.
Exactly. So I definitely want people to understand that interaction with Sorcerer's Spyglass. I think that Sorcerer Spyglass is probably one of the best answers in the format right now for a ton of decks. You can call Heart of Kirin. Heart of Kirin's crew ability is an activated ability. So, like if you need to hedge against a Heart of Kirin that they play on turn 2, you go, okay, well, fine, here's my turn 2, Sorcerer Spyglass. Now, you either have to answer that with your Braid, which means you're not putting a creature down that can crew the heart, and I've just gained myself an extra turn, or something like that. Now, do I think that Sorcerer Spyglass is absolutely terrific against the red-green or red-black matchups or the matchups that have a braids? Probably not. But if you have other small to mid-range creatures, then Tezzerets Touch a Spyglass. Wow, yeah, that seems good. 5/5 Spyglass, let's do it. Yeah. Yeah, 5/5 Spyglasses. Let's do it. If you're playing something like an improvised deck or something, I definitely think that the Spyglass is going to be terrific. If you guys do put it into your decks, you're going to see what I'm talking about. Just there are so many cards that you can call that people are playing that put major holes in their decks when they can't cast these cards or they can't use these cards. Do remember though, if you're running Teferi and you play Sorcerer Spyglass and call Teferi, you will not be activating your Teferi. You can play it, you can put it on the battlefield, but you will not be activating your Teferi. It does stop all players from using the named card. So if you are putting it in a blue-black deck and you call the Scarab God, you're not going to be using the Scarab God. So that is something I want you guys to be like very, very in tune with. Gideon's Intervention.
Gideon's Intervention is a really good one because that shuts down so many cards as well.
And it can preemptively shut them down.
It shuts down bloody Carnage Tyrant even, and yeah.
You can actually shut down something like a Carnage Tyrant after the Carnage Tyrant has hit the battlefield with Gideon's Intervention. Yeah. The card is terrific. I think Gideon's Intervention is really good. As far as I know, though, if you guys are playing on MTGO, Gideon's Intervention has not been fixed. So when you play the second Gideon's Intervention, the first one is no longer doing anything. Yeah, that's a.
But you can stop the Scree with Spyglass as well, because it's an activated ability. The Scree is.
No.
It says you may cast it.
That's not an activate. That's not activated. You're just casting it. You're not activating an ability. It just has a. Yeah, it has static text on it. It just has this. It can be done this way. So
my fault.
Spyglass ain't stopping no squee.
Sorry, guys.
Oh, you're good, man. I do it 90% of the time. Anyway, so those cards are going to be absolutely terrific. One of the better ways to beat decks like this red-green aggro deck or red-black aggro, which we're kind of getting away from here a little bit. You're going to need sweepers. Sweltering Suns is terrific. If you're in red, it does a real number on these decks. You're going to wipe everything in the deck main board except for Glorybringer. That's pretty big, guys. Like just getting rid of the Scrap Heap Scroungers, the Soulscar Mages, the Small Walking Ballistas, putting Rekindling Phoenix in the graveyard, Pia Nalara and the token, Goblin Chain Whirler, like all of these die to Sweltering Suns, a Yahini's Expertise, any board wipes running Settles of your own, Fumigates of your own. These are all cards that are going to help you a lot in both the red-black matchup and the mono-red matchup. So the big thing on Settle, though, or not Settle, but Sweltering Suns, is it doesn't actually help very much against the mono green matchups because it can't really deal with the Steel Leaf Champion very well. However, spot removal where you can deal with those early creatures and things like that from your like Llanowar Elf and things like that. Those are really, really good. Yes, you can cycle it when you're against something like if you have the card in your deck and you come up against like a blue-white control deck, you could always just cycle it away. So Sweltering Suns is a really good card. Personally, I'm liking the Yahini's Expertise in my 3-color deck because I've got some cards like Thrashing Bronzodon that I can't always get the double green for, and I can cheat it down off of a Yahini's Expertise. So like there's some play there that you can do with your board wipe. So make sure that you're running some type of board wipe in your deck. You do want it to be fairly cheap, but you want it to be effective. So I don't think that I would be running something like Pirate's Pillage unless I was running the Soul Scar Mages or something like that, because you need to be able to get those chain whirlers. If you can't deal with a Goblin Chain Whirler with your board wipe, then you're probably just a little bit too small. Now, just a week or so ago, we were seeing a lot of people running Golden Demise, and that was because of the History of Benalias that were being played, where there were a lot more History of Benalias in the main decks. What is Pillage going to do to save you? It's going to filter some cards and help you find the card that it will actually save you. Give you the ramp. I don't know. I know you're joking with the pillage, but still, I just don't think that pillage is going to let you draw a card, discard a card, and draw two more cards and have 7 mana on turn 5. So you need the rest of your deck built to be able to abuse that before pillage is going to be a good card. Now, when you're saying pillage, if you're running black. If you're running black, you could run Heartless Pillage, and oh, um, yeah, Heartless Pillage is uh, the card that makes them discard 2 cards. So like this
Yeah,
was
it's
something we.
annoying actually.
Yes, and there are more and more people are actually throwing that in the sideboards of their decks. Whether or not that's a really good idea, I don't really know. Let's see if this guy's got one. No, he's running the Argyle's Bloodfast. Chandra's Defeats are still getting played. I guess that's good for Glorybringer hedging. Chandra's Defeats is a really good card against the mono red decks and against the red black decks, as most of their creatures are red, based in the other than like Scrap Heap Scrounger and your Heart of Kieran's and things. So we've been dealing with Heart of Kieran since, oh God, first time Marty Vehicles was a thing. So ever
Yeah,
how you've been dealing with it being in the meta in the past, don't forget that. Keep dealing with Heart of Kieran in that direction. Just authority of the consoles is one of the best ways to stop, like to slow it down. So authority is a really really good card, but Heart of Kieran itself is also a good card against the blue white control decks, mainly because you're being able to put some serious damage in very early, but that doesn't tap. Yes, you're tapping the other creature, and they may be able to flash in a seal away to get the creature that you tap down. However, they're not going to get the creature that's about to smack them in the face for 4 damage. So
no,
that is really, really good as far as just flat out tech versus those blue white control deck. So if you're thinking about running red black aggro, just know that the red black aggro deck does push out enough threats early. It does push out hard enough threats that they do need to answer with like a Settle the Wreckage or a Fumigate. It does push out resilient threats that are not exactly well suited for black whites, or sorry, blue black, no, blue white's removal package. So like Seal Away is just not that great against Heart of Kieran. So yeah.
yeah, anything with vigilance it kind of falls down on.
Right. If you got Lyras, things like that that you can play, then by all means, those are really, really good cards. We see Doomfall and Duress here, black cards that are really good. I actually like Duress against these red-black aggro decks. I know that seems a little bit funny, but in Game 2, most of the time, almost all the time, they'll bring in something like a Chandra or a couple of their other cards. Like they're going to sideboard, and these Karns and Chandras seem to come in almost all matchups. But yet they have mainboard Chandras and Karns and things like that. So Duress is a really good card for you to run against them. Cut to Ribbons is only a card that I would run against someone who is running something like Regisaur Alphas or Glorbringers. Like, so
Yeah.
it's just really good against those.
Another
Um,
good card is Cast Down.
Yes, Cast Down is a terrific card, and another card that we have failed to mention is Struggle to Survive. Struggle to Survive is
Yes.
instant speed and does a number on these decks that are trying to bring their scrap heap scroungers back from the graveyard. Just being able to, let me go ahead and kill that Heart of Kirin, and then on my turn, I'm going to go ahead and, you know, wipe the graveyard so you don't have the opportunity to bring back these scrap heap scroungers and go from there. So that is an option. You're not going to say, Spyglass and say, hey, Struggle to Survive. So Struggle to Survive is a really good card, and that's something else we need to think about. There are so many other people out there. Like, we're not at the forefront when it comes to this Sorcerer Spyglass technology. We've seen Saffron Olive talk about it. I've been talking about it. Even Dev mentioned that it's just a really good piece of tech. So, like, there's a lot of people out there that are getting fed this Sorcerer Spyglass technology on how to beat these blue-white control decks. So we're going to be seeing more and more Sorcerer Spyglasses. So you need to think about that Patrick Chapin, style of let's next level their their sideboard tech. So if you're playing something that you think you might be weak to a Sorcerer Spyglass, or you have an activated ability, then at that point you might actually want to, bring in an answer to your own for Sorcerer Spyglass yourself. So that's something else to think about. I'm going to move on past this red black aggro deck. We've seen all the cards in this red black aggro deck. It's not something that we're not really familiar with, so I'm definitely going to say that most of us should know how to fight it. This next control deck here is actually full of creatures. We've got 15 creatures here. We've got Angel of Inventions, and that's because it's a God-Pharaoh's Gift deck. It's the refurbished version of God-Pharaoh's Gift. You're not going to be casting Sorcerer Spyglass to call God-Pharaoh's Gift because this is not an activated ability. It's a triggered ability. So Divest is a solid card for control. But doesn't Divest only give you like a creature or planeswalker? Okay, so they're not holding
creature or artifact divest.
Oh, so you're not even getting a planeswalker. So
no, it's that's duress is basically that. Yeah, so it's just artifact or creature.
Okay, so I don't think I would want to bring in, like, if I am playing control against like an aggro deck, then maybe Divest would be good in that deck. But against the control decks, I think that Duress would hold that spot better. Not to use against control when you are playing. Understood. All right. Well, now we're on the same page, Horde. Yes, Divest is a good card. You're going to be able to throw cards in the graveyard, but what are you going to do here? Are you going to divest them and put their God-Pharaoh's Gift in the graveyard for them? Or are you going to divest them and put their Angel of Invention in the graveyard for them? So against like a deck like this, like Divest would be absolutely horrible. You're just going to help them out. Whereas against all the other decks, you're going to rip out like a great threat out of their hand. Especially you're going to rip out the threat that you don't have other answers for in your hand. So Divest is not very bad. But if you're just looking for some creature hate or something like that, I do think that it might be a little bit better in our current meta with people playing Aetherflux Reservoir and things like that, Hearts of Kirin, that Divest is better than the harsh scrutiny that we've had in the past. So Divest is decent. God-Pharaoh's Gift, the God-Pharaoh's Gift deck that we see here, as far as I know, is running Lyra Dawnbringer and Shala Voice of Plenty. Those should be like some of the only new cards in this deck. And yeah, I'm looking. All right, so there's two Karns in the sideboard. All right, so there's two Karns in the sideboard. There's one Lyra and one Shala. Those are the only new cards in this, so there's nothing like really new there. How you've been beating, the have artifact removal, have artifact hate. It needs to be instant speed because the 1/6/6 angel could do you in. Yeah, Acroma is no joke. Or Baneslayer Angel, whatever you want to call it, Flying Vigilance Lifelink. This can't be Silhouette or something like that. So maybe you're someone who has been playing the blue-white God-Pharaoh's Gift in the past. now might be a really good time to start playing that again. Do think that you're going to have a lot of game ones where you get to actually play your hand out much slower than normal, with the bluff that you are actually the blue-white control deck, not the God-Pharaoh's gift deck. So you can, if you have a horrible hand in game one, you can actually kind of get away with that a little bit in the God-Pharaoh's gift deck because the Teferi deck is in standard right now. So do know that that is a play that you can make. Um, hmm. Should we even cover the blue-white God-Pharaoh's gift anymore? I mean, that's kind of, it's
Yeah,
pretty.
it's pretty standard though, isn't it? With some extra toys,
Right,
really.
yeah, it's got a couple extra toys, and that's basically it. I mean, if the Angel of Invention coming back as a 6/6 wasn't a problem for you before, then Lyra's not a problem for you. Just flat out. I mean, if you can kill that Angel, you can kill the Lyra, because you got
Yeah.
converted mana cost and everything with the God Pharaoh's gift. So I mean, it's still a thing. The next blue-white control deck is just another Gideon Teferi deck. Sillaways, Pull from Tomorrow, Fumigates, Fatal Push. I mean, not Fatal Push, but Commit to Memory, Disallow, Essence Scatter. All the things that we're used to seeing. This particular deck's only running two Blink of an Eyes, where the other was running three. That's like the only major difference I see in the main board. Sideboards are still pretty standard. I don't know if I like this Aether Meltdown here, but that is a way that they can deal with your creature without actually putting it in the graveyard. And in some cases, that's not a bad thing. Forsake the Worldly, Fumigate, another Gideon, History of Benalia, couple Karns, Negate, Nezahal, which is not something we normally see, and then Sorcerer's Spyglass. And remember, Sorcerer's Spyglass is not going to be as good in this deck because the number one thing you want to call with Sorcerer's Spyglass is Teferi, and if you call Teferi, then you can't use your Teferi. So, again, we just have another copy of that deck. So I'm going to move to the mono green aggro. I am trying to pick up the pace here a little bit, guys. I know James is going to have to be leaving soon, and I need to kind of be
Yeah, I got
wrapping
it
this
in.
up.
Yeah.
So next here we have the mono green deck. This is a Llanowar into Stillleaf Champion, and I might be able to kill you before you can cast Settle the Wreckage. Yeah, like turn two Stillleaf Champion is going to deal 5 damage on 3 and threaten another 5 damage on 4. And especially if you were able to follow that up with another big threat on 3, then yeah, I mean you might be able to just flat out hose the opponent here.
The way you beat this deck is take some damage initially, and then kill their stuff. And once you start killing their stuff, they kind of fall down. Especially if you fail to push their Llanowar elves, that's a big blow for them because that slows them down instantly. You just got to keep. You just got to make it that Galter, yeah, is a clunky card in the hand that they can't, and it's quite doable. You just have to have the right tools to deal with. And against this deck, a card like Rekindling Phoenix is actually really good because if you can turn 3 Rekindling Phoenix or even just turn 4, it's a really good blocker versus Steel Leaf Champion, and it's going to survive. Steel Leaf Champion is not going to survive there. Cast Down's pretty good. Getting with their Steel Leaf Champion. Vraska's Contempt is also pretty good, but it's a bit slow and clunky. Yeah.
I agree. I agree 100%. You'll also see that this deck is running 4 mainboard Thrashing Brontodons. Um, the Brontodon is really good in the other matchups. So, I mean, here you see, a deck that top aided, and it is, yes, Cut to Ribbons is also really good there. I didn't think about that. I was thinking of Regisaur Alpha and Glorybringer, but you're right.
Yeah.
Cut to Ribbons does help deal with the Still Leaf Champion. So, if in your meta you got somebody running around with this deck, Cut to Ribbons might be one that you want to look into putting in your deck.
I actually think though Fight with Fire for an extra match in some ways.
I'm gonna say if you don't have the black, then yeah, Fight with Fire. I'm gonna say if you have the black, Cut with Ribbons is gonna be a really good card to have in the graveyard. The Ribbons is gonna be nice in quite a few cases. I've killed quite a few people with Ribbons, but yes, Fight with Fire's also got that effect of, hey, I may pull this late and just dome you for 10. So yeah, that could be a thing. Let's look at his sideboard here really quick. He's running Aether Sphere Harvester, Cartouche of Ambition. I think that this card is absolutely phenomenal in the meta right now. If you have a good hardy threat, something like a Carnage Tyrant or something like that, that you can put this on, it's game over. Lights out, go home, pack it up, James wins. Um, like Carnage
Yeah, and
Tyrant,
Dolta.
right?
Yeah,
Put it on a Galta, and the Galta can be removed. But put it on a Carnage Tyrant, and they have
yeah,
to have that settle or fumigate, or it's just going to be over. Like the amount of damage that you're going to start getting through, and the life link, the entire like 14-point life swing, or no, sorry, it would be a 16-point life swing because you'd get that +1/+1 on it, is going to be huge, huge. Just flat out like buying you a ton of time. Another card that is in this sideboard that I want to mention that I am starting to like more and more. I've even got it in the sideboard of my Sultai Reanimator deck, and that's Crushing Canopy. So we're seeing so much enchantment removal or enchantments and stuff like that in the decks. Flying is becoming more prevalent. This can kill Glorybringers. It can kill Lyras. It can kill Angel of Inventions. It can kill a ton of things for 3 mana at instant speed. And then if it doesn't kill one of those flyers that is really dangerous, you can just pop a Cast Out, or you can pop a Search for Azcanta, or an Argyle's Bloodfast. All of these cards are getting played. You can destroy Heart of Kieran once it's been activated because it's a flying creature, or you can destroy an enchantment. Like what enchantment would even be in that deck? There are no Argyle's Bloodfast, I guess. The
yeah.
sagas,
Circle of Ganta.
all the sagas can be destroyed by this. So even in decks where you're like, they might be running Lyra here, I'm not 100% sure, but they probably got some sealaways. So yeah, let's go ahead and bring this in. And now you've actually, like, you don't have a dead card, but you also have hedged against a possible threat that could kill you. And let's face it, Lyra can get the job done. Lyra can kill you. Um, Hour of Glory, this is a really good card. Like, if you don't have the Vraska's Contempts, this is just a terrific card. It does just exile creatures. This is not going to do anything against Planeswalkers, though, so this card's not like exactly where I would want to be, but against something like a Hazoret deck or the Scarab God deck or something, then this is going to be really good. It's also decent against the Ronus decks. But remember, you don't just have to kill gods with it. You can just instant speed exile any creature as long as you can target it. He's running some Lifecrafters Bestiaries here, or Bestiaries. These are just really, really good cards. We mentioned these earlier as they're going to give you that extra card value. Vraska, her value is going up a little bit as far as, people wanting to play with her. She's got really good answers. Like enchantment removal is supreme right now, and her neg 3 ability is terrific. So we don't see Sorcerer's Spyglass here in the sideboard of this particular deck, but he has some really, really good answers for the opposing teams that give him a hard matchup, mainly because like those turn 2s that this deck has the opportunity to make, those turn 2s are absolutely devastating and can get a lot of work done. And when he's swinging with a single 5/4 creature, he can leave back some of the other creatures and force those Settle the Wreckages. So, big creatures like that for good, cheap converted mana cost, making sure that you can get those out on curve is one of your best ways to defeat almost any deck. Make them be on the back foot.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Eric, I am gonna have to go rather than interrupting you.
Oh,
you're
good.
See you guys soon, yeah, because I have got to get to work.
I'm going to continue going over this improvised deck and this black-white aggro deck, and then we'll hit the Constrictor deck, and that'll just about do it. So I'm definitely gonna go ahead.
Well, talk to you later then. Have a good day, guys.
Later, sir.
And good luck. See you soon, guys. Bye bye.
Yeah,
Thanks
make
a
sure
lot.
you get those papers marked.
Yeah.
Have a good day, sir.
Anytime. See you soon. Bye.
Herald of Anguish is really good here because this deck, it runs the Herald of Anguishes. I like Herald because if they don't have an answer for it right away, you can actually wait a couple turns, make them have to discard cards over and over until like things are just over. This is also probably one of the best decks that you can be running Karn in. You're actually utilizing his down tick ability, making your card draw engine also a threat. So too bad Squee didn't make the top 8. You know, you're just gonna have to take it to a GP and top 8 with it. So you can be like, yo, that Squee deck. But yeah, there's a ton of artifacts in this deck, and the big thing about those is most of them are so mediocre that they just have to let them go, and then they have really good hard to answer threats like Karn, Herald of Anguish, which like Herald of Anguish pretty much has to be dealt with the same way the Scarab God does. Like you have to like pretty much everything that will kill it's like Vraska's Contempt, you know, you cast out Six Lines Bindings, things like that. These are all cards that will help you deal with Herald of Anguish. The Herald is one of the biggest things that you can run up against in this deck. The other is making sure that you can deal with their Karn. Tezzeret is more or less an enabler for the rest of the decks, but Tezzeret's ultimate is also something that you can't overlook. If they get their ultimate off, they've got enough cheap artifacts and things like that that you know, turning a Prophetic Prism into a 5/5 and just swinging at you is always going to hurt, and you're not going to be happy about that. Metallic Rebuke's a really good card, so if you have the option to be running counter, like this deck is, any type of counter, whether it's Pirate counter, like Artifact counter here with the Metallic Rebuke, or Pirate enabled counter, or Artifact enabled counter, or what's up, Rush, or if it was
Did I miss it? I
yeah,
literally just got done with my food tasting for my wedding.
oh man, well, congratulations. I hope the food was great. You caught me right in the middle of a thought here. Um, but if you're running those Metallic Rebuke enabled Artifact enabled counters, Wizard enabled counters, or Pirate enabled counters, they're really, really good spells, and they're cheap enough that you can normally force your opponents to tap more lands than they originally wanted to, or you're just going to counter them outright. And yeah, absolutely. Congratulations, Rush. I just wanted to finish that thought here. Yeah, you're about an hour and a half late. You're good though.
I figured it was.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm going through the decks here, and we're talking about like what some of the better cards to run in the format right now to hedge your deck against some of these other decks. I personally think that anytime you can get some mainboard counters in, that's going to really increase your matchup versus the blue-white deck. Mainboard counters may or may not help you against some of the aggro decks. They might get a couple early creatures in under you, and if you're relying on the counter, then you might not be able to actually you know, stop something that came down a little bit earlier than your counter. Syncopate is really, really good. If you guys are running those blue cards, then Syncopate is just a terrific card. But when it really comes down to it, Negate's going to be one of the better cards that you can run. Now, Negate is also really good here. Essence Scatter is really good here to stop these decks. Most of the time with this artifact deck, there's only 3 real cards in the deck that you have to stop. Most of them you're going to be able to stop either via combat or something like that, but the cards that you're really going to have to stop here are going to be Herald of Anguish, and you do need to be able to answer that ASAP, or it's going to gain a little bit of card advantage on you. They play a card, they make you have to, you know, discard a card at the end of their turn, and then of course then you have to play a card the next turn to remove it. So if you have some instant speed like cast out or something like that, and you can get them before they reach their end step, then that's going to be really good when it comes time for the Herald of Anguish. The other card that you really need to answer in this deck, and that's Karn. And Karn, like I said, is more dangerous here than he is in most of the other decks. And that's because they just have so many artifacts that a single down tick from Karn can sometimes produce, you know, a 5/5, 6/6, or a 7/7. Like, it can get out of hand really, really quick. By the time they even get to a Karn, they could be making just devastating creatures absolutely every turn. And that is something that you really need to worry about. Down tick, and then start upticking Karn. Like, that is that's going to be really, really bad news for you. And then the third card that you really got to answer in this deck is going to be the Antiquities War. Antiquities War is you're not putting Touch of Tezzeret on the deck on the cards, but you are still getting that same effect. Touch of Tezzeret's a really good card. I like the idea of Touch of Tezzeret. Running with Scissors was always a really good card, but Antiquities War is going to give you that effect. You do have a little bit of setup that you have to have going on with Antiquities War, but do remember, like if you're running 3 of them, you can start playing them back to back to back, and going down through your library and getting cards and turning your creatures into 5/5s, then the next turn turning them into 5/5s, and so on and so on. So there are there are your major must counters. You will see that this deck is running main board Sorcerer Spyglass. This deck particularly gets away with it better than most other decks because it's not only a non-dead card in most matchups like we've already spoken about, but it's always a live card in an artifact deck or an improvised deck, because you can always just tap this to play something like a Zahid if you're playing Zahid. Zahid is also another good blue answer for something like Lyra or Glorybringer. Zahid can take the hit from Glorybringer's Exert and then still block the Glorybringer. So, like, it requires more than just Glorybringer swinging into Zahid, and that's a really really good thing. Looking at their sideboard, we'll see Sentinel Totem. We do see the Golden Demise, or the Golden Demise here. Not a big fan of it, as I don't think that it's going to help us against the Goblin Chain Whirlers and stuff. But having any type of board wipe is going to help some. I just think that it's too easy for them to get above a Golden Demise, which is probably why this deck is running 2 copies of Bantu's Last Reckoning as well. And I think that that's got a lot to do with the fact that the Golden Demise is not going to get some of the bigger creatures, but Bantu's Last Reckoning will get those Carnage Tyrants. It will get pretty much all of those cards, and that's not something they're normally expecting from a black deck right now. Having absolute board wipe is just not something that people are expecting. So I kind of like where the Bantu's Last Reckoning is coming from out of the sideboard here. What about you, Rush? What do you think about this improvised deck, and how would you beat it?
I would just try to kill it faster than it can go off. That's just me personally.
Okay, so you want to be aggressive.
I want to be aggressive as possible and make them answer everything. But even though I'm a Rakdos guy, I probably have to go Grixis. That's all to me personally.
You think you need the negates or something right now? Like why the blue?
Exactly. Yeah, just the blue just for negates. You know, just like you said, basically everything you said, to cancel everything that just needs canceled. The little bit, the bigger threats, not the little stuff, just the
right,
like
the important stuff, the Karn, the Teferi, the.
That's it.
Gotcha. So your big answer against most of the meta right now would just be negate and duress, then, right?
For me personally, I mean, the only thing you really need to worry about right now in my personal LGS is blue black and then white blue. There's very few people that are doing anything that is ran as what? Oh yeah. There's very few things as aggro. Like I'm the only aggro player really in my LGS.
So, okay, so basically negate and duress and Sorcerer Spyglass would just deal with almost everything for you.
That's it. Basically. Because my decks run fast enough. You know, I love my pump spells and things of that nature. I get going pretty quick before because they have to set up. You know what I mean? Like they have to set everything up, and they're gonna take a ton of damage before they can.
Keep going. Sorry, it's clear my throat.
I mean, that's basically about it. You know what I mean? Me personally, because I don't play a lot of blue, so I don't usually do counters. So I mean, what you said was perfect, in all honesty. But when I'm talking about me personally, I just try and get underneath everything and just kill them fast.
Okay, awesome. The main reason I asked you that is I was asking the other guys the exact same question about the other decks. But those are really good answers, and those are just that's a good package to have if you're running blue and black. Some duresses, some negates. You pretty much have answers for almost anything you need. You can throw Admiral's Orders. You can throw other cheap spells like Spell Pierce. These are all good ways to deal with like Settle the Wreckage and things like that.
Oh, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No, you're good.
I will say this. I honestly, God, do think that Dream Stealer right now is probably best as is needed right now more than ever.
Um,
I think so personally.
I mean, if you connect with a Dream Stealer and they have something like settle, like or sorry, not settle. Like if you go to swing with Dream Stealer and it gets settled, or you go to swing with Dream Stealer and it gets castaway, then you're like, I don't want to be setting in a world where I'm expecting to play this Dream Stealer and then like pump it next turn. I don't really think I want to be setting there. I would much rather like
Oh,
have a way to pitch the
I
Dream Stealer and just bring it back from the graveyard for like 5 or 6 mana. Is it 5 or 6? 6, ain't it?
It's 6. I mean, I agree with everything you're saying, but that's the thing. That's the problem, though. I mean, a lot of people are just scared to do a lot of things because they automatically, even though it's rightfully so, they assume that they're going to have settle. If you see white, you automatically think settle, castaway, or some type of like exile, which is again is rightfully so. But I mean, you can't just not play a card because X, Y, and Z. You know what I mean?
That's like the exact reasons I don't play a card is because I can name an X, Y, and Z.
But that's the case. Then every card is gonna be like every card is gonna.
Every card has its day. Yes, every card has its day. There's going to be a point where active treason cards are going to be absolutely terrific, but it could be a shift in the meta, and in the very next week you wouldn't want a single copy of them in your entire deck. So there are points like if everyone's swinging with Lyra on turn 6, then an active treason or what's the current version? Kari Zev's expertise, yes. Kari Zev's expertise is a terrific card. I'm gonna take the card you were about to use to lifelink with. I'm gonna take it from you. I'm gonna play this Earthshaker Kenra as well. Make the other little thing you have not be able to block, and I'm just gonna kill you right now. Yes, those are really good tempo swings. And if everyone was playing, I'm going to turn 5 this Lyra, and we're just going to kill you with that, you can normally have them down to low life by that point, take their one stabilizing creature away from them, crack them in the face with it along with your other creatures, and just win. So yeah, there are like times where any card can be good, but there's also times where you're like, I'm not going to run Lost Legacy because no one is playing Approach. But then you're only going to be able to do that for a little while, and then all of a sudden an Approach deck's going to pop back up, and you're going to want to change that slot. You're going to be like, I'm putting 2 more Lost Legacies back in my sideboard, and that'll just happen. So that's the natural wear and tear on the meta. That's the natural optimization of your decks based on how the shifts in the meta go. So because of X, Y, and Z, that's the exact reasons I want to be running cards like Sorcerer Spyglass or Abrade or Thrashing Brontodon, Karn, Scion of Urza, Lifecrafter's Bestiary, Lost Legacy, like that. These are all cards that just are really, really good against major decks in the meta. So
Sorcerer Spyglass can only do it. Like you can't name Settle the Wreckage or anything like that, right? It has to be something with an activated ability.
Correct, but it's just not the answer for Settle the Wreckage. So that's why I say a package where you've got Negate, Duress, and Sorcerer Spyglass is a terrific package to defeat the blue-white decks. It's a terrific package to defeat most decks. However, fighting against a blue-black control deck, I actually wouldn't want Duress or Negate, possibly Negate, but I would actually just want Vraska's Contempt, more good kill spells. I would want a way to deal with the Torrential Gearhulk and the Scarab God. Another 10-15 minutes. Yeah, I've got another deck I want to go over here real quick, and then we'll go from there. Val's got to get back to work, so. Yeah.
I'm going to pull out for a second because I don't want to make a lot of noise. I'm about to walk into the house, but I'll be right back.
All right, man. I'm just gonna move you up here. There we go. So he can jump back down when he's ready. Let's look at this black-white deck here. Now this is the one that I really wanted Justin Clay to take a look at. It's a black-white aggro deck. It does use Karns. It uses Gideon of the Trials, and it uses Heart of Kiran. Heart of Kiran is like one of the big cards here. History of Benalia is really good. This deck puts a lot of threats out. It's almost like the Knights deck. We do see, Knight of Malice here. However, I think that the Knight of Grace is also a really, really good card to be running in this deck. So if, like, maybe you didn't have 4 Karns, you didn't have 3 Gideons, you could fill those spots with Knight of Grace for a little while. I don't know if I would want to go so heavy on the Knight of Malice. Yes, it has protection, from cards like Seal Away, because those are white, abilities. It's not going to be able to target it. You would run Grace over Toolcraft, if for no other reason than Goblin Chainwhirler. The Toolcraft does give you a turn 1 creature that then you play an artifact on turn 2. But if you'll notice, there's not a ton of artifacts in this deck. There is Scrapheap Scrounger, Walking Ballista, and Heart of Kiran. That is it. So why 3 Gideons? Because Gideon helps crew Heart of Kiran and becomes a 4/4 himself. He can give you the anti-lose clause, so you can't lose the game, or your opponents can't win the game. Let's see, you get an emblem with, as long as you control a Gideon Planeswalker, you can't lose the game, and your opponents can't win the game. So that is not horrible. However, Gideon still got some holes in him as well, but I think the major reason for Gideon here is to pair with the Heart of Kiran and to do additional, 4 points of damage. Gideon is more of a beater in this deck than he is in a lot of the other decks. So also you can stop something that might be able to profitably, block a Heart of Kiran or something. You can say, okay, well, if you're going to block me with that, that's going to die, because I'm going to make sure it can't deal damage back to my Heart of Kiran. So, like, there's abilities there. You can uptick Gideon and things like that. Absolutely, Thopter Arrest is a card that we're not used to, and that's because people are learning to play around cards like Seal Away. You'll notice that I don't believe there's any Seal Away in this deck whatsoever. Nope, he went for the 4 copies of Thopter Arrest, and that's because people are like, the important creatures, they're just not swinging with them. They're worried about the Seal Away, so they're just not going to swing with them, and they're leaving them back. Something like turning a Phoenix into a blocker indefinitely. Okay, fine, I'm just going to set this, Rekindling Phoenix here on defense, and we'll just leave him there. That's not a bad play. So, cards like Thopter Arrest just gets it out of the way. Yeah, it gets GPG too. This is true. You can exile target artifact or creature an opponent controls. The big negative on trying to exile something like a GPG is that when you actually like hit the GPG, you're at sorcery speed, so the chances are they've already gotten at least 1/4/4 out of it. So, but I do like Thopter Arrest. I think Thopter Arrest is one of those next level cards that people are not expecting, and that if you put Thopter Arrest in your deck, they're going to be playing around something like Seal Away, and Thopter Arrest is going to get them. I mean, like, I'm not going to swing with the Scarab God. Ha ha ha, take 4 from my 4/4, and then you end up Thopter Arresting it. Anyway, that's not bad. That's not bad at all. Lyra in the sideboard, 3 Fumigates in the sideboard, 4 Duress. We see Argyle's Bloodfast. These are all cards pretty much that we have mentioned at some point in today's show. Pretty much everything in this sideboard except for the If Near Deadlands and the Thopter Arrest we've talked about. Lyra just being really, really good. When it comes to Lyra versus Karn, Karn's going to put you ahead if you're already ahead. Lyra's going to bring you back from being behind. So, and any of the Spyglass and whatnot, Yes, you could take someone's spyglass with a thopter arrest. You can do things like that. So if they're spyglassing your Heart of Quran or something like that, you can thopter arrest that spyglass and then activate that Heart of Kiran and go from there. So you would like to see me run this deck actually? Okay.
What deck is this?
This is the black white aggro deck from
Vehicles deck. It's a vehicle
Louisville.
deck, right?
Yeah, are you from Kentucky, Rush?
No, I'm from Pittsburgh.
Oh, Pittsburgh, Pittsburgh. I'm going to ask you this question anyway. I think Justin Clay. I think he's the one from Kentucky.
Yeah, Justin's from
All
Kentucky.
right, he'll like this, because SEG Classic was in Louisville. How do you pronounce the capital of Kentucky? Louisville or Louisville?
Louisville.
I say Frankfurt, but cool. Um,
Okay. Is it Frankfurt?
yeah, it's Frankfurt. Just a stupid old joke that I just thought was funny. Anyway, neither. It's Frankfurt. Yeah, the Kentucky boy got that. You'll be surprised how many people in Kentucky, dun dun dun, fail that one. Anyway, just breaking the staleness there, but Louis, not Lewis. Yeah, I call it Louisville.
Who calls it Louisville?
In different parts of the country, and it can be pronounced either way. So I mean,
I guess.
yeah,
Louisville.
yeah.
Or Louisville. A lot of people say Louisville up there, probably.
That's okay. There's a place in Kentucky called Justin's gonna get me already. I'm gonna call it Versailles, but if you go there, it's called Versailles, Kentucky. But it's
Oh
spelled.
yeah, we say North for Sales. Like there's a place up here called North for Sales.
Yeah, that word is not pronounced Versailles. It's Versailles. But whatever. You know, who am I? Who am I to talk about how words are pronounced? But yeah, I think that's a little bit interesting. Anyway, let's move into the Constrictor deck. This is going to be one of the last decks I talk about today, and
Are we talking about how we beat these decks? Or
yes.
just what
That's
you put in?
exactly what we're talking about. How you beat
Okay.
these decks. So if you missed blue white control, red black
I missed all
aggro,
of it. I only got
then
the
you're going to
last
want to go
one.
back and watch that. Glint Sleeve Siphoner, Jade Light Ranger, Lana War Elves, Merfolk, Branch Walker, Ravenous Chupacabra, Rishkar, Verdurous Gear Hulk, Winding Constrictor, and Walking Ballista. Pretty straightforward. Nothing really new in the creature base. In fact, there are 0 new
Later,
cards
Justin.
other than Lana War Elves. See you, Justin. Take care, buddy. There's Lana War Elves is the only card in this mana base that is new. Adventurous Impulse is another new card, but other than that and the Woodland Cemeteries, nothing's new here. So ever how you have been keeping this deck held down in the past, that's what you're going to want to do again. Fatal Push is still phenomenal versus this
I'm about
deck.
to say just kill everything. as
Yes,
quick as possible.
just Fatal Push, Fatal Push, Fatal Push. Braid the Gear Hulk, Settle the Wreckage will destroy this deck. Yeah, it is not hard to beat this deck. Like the fact that
Sweltering Suns would just destroy this deck.
or the deck called Outgrow Sweltering Suns, one or the other. I mean, if
Yeah.
they turn to a Winding Constrictor and you're like, well, I'm going to Sweltering Suns that next turn, and they go, okay, well, Rishkar, Pima Renegade. Well, there went that Sweltering Suns opportunity. So, like, the chances of using Sweltering Suns to get multiple creatures in a deck like this is going to be hard. So I would rather just have good single target removal and not try to 2 or 3 for one of them unless I was playing something like Settle, Hour of Destruction, or Fumigate. Now, or Bantu's Last Reckoning. Any solid wipe, any solid board wipe is going to do you some good there. But only dealing 3 damage or only dealing 2 damage or -2 or -3 is not normally going to do it.
Playing over. I'm sorry to interrupt you. That I was playing over when I was playing the Team Sealed event I just went to. What was it? With Nicol Bolas on the cover, or no, Phyrexian Scriptures.
Friction and
That card,
Scriptures is actually a really good card. Yes, it is. I mean, you
I'm
get to
growing. I'm
save your
starting to like
creature.
it a lot more.
Yes, I've been enjoying it in my sideboards. The problem is you do need to have that targeted removal to hedge in the early turns. But
Oh yeah, I agree. But I'm just saying for like late game or even just to stall them because they don't
oh
want to
yeah,
put anything on the
yeah,
board. You know what I mean?
good mid game value out of the Scriptures and stuff there. So this deck isn't very special. There's not a lot new going on with the deck. This particular version of the deck is running no removal whatsoever, just threat after threat after threat, which means you can be 100% free to fight. You don't have to worry about your opponent having a lot of removal versus you. The biggest things you got to worry about in this deck is 4 copies of Ravenous Chupacabra and the Walking Ballistas. So they can ping down your small guys. They can, Ravenous Chupacabra, things like Lyra. Glorybringer is going to be really, really good versus this deck. Uh, Another card I didn't really mention, but I find that it's really good against this deck and a lot of the Planeswalker decks, and that's Hour of Devastation. Hour of Devastation is one of those that's going to deal damage to everything. It's a very hot burning wrath, if you will. 5 damage to every creature and every
Blues and
planeswalker.
destructibility, all that stuff.
Right. So, Hour of Devastation is looking a little bit better than it ever has before. So, that is something to think about. You've got multiple planeswalkers down. They're ticking up. They're ticking down. They're doing things. Hour of Devastation is going to be really great. If you could cast the Hour of Revelation, there's quite a few games that you could just flat out win because you cast that spell. I think that Hour of Revelation right now actually is better than Urza's Ruinous Blast.
Ravenous Blast, yeah.
Yes, Hour of Revelation is starting to look a little bit better, and that's just because like the card is absolute. I mean, it's just going to exile everything, or is it
In all
destroy
honesty, out of
everything?
all of the legendary sorceries or whatever they are, like y'all's Urza's Ruinous Blast, or whatever it is probably one of the weaker ones to me. I know it's more powerful, but I'm just saying, like, it's just the fact that you
Well,
ever had the legendary. I just didn't like it.
I find all of them to be a little bit win more. If I've already got my legendary down and I'm doing things, then
Yawgmoth is pretty good. Actually, it's a really good card because you
Yawgmoth's
can get
Vile
serious
Offering. I
with
do like
Yeah,
that because you can play it off of like Liliana. You have your Liliana. She's your legendary. You're already doing things that you want to be doing. Um, so yeah, Yawgmoth's is actually decent. The Vile Offering. Um, it's
because it
card
doesn't cost
advantage.
as much as the other ones either. I think it's only 5. The rest of them are like 6 or something.
Right. So yeah, I mean that's a cool card. But for the most part, nothing really special here in this deck. I mean, you'll notice that he is running 3 copies of Lifecrafter's Bestiary, and we said, um, that this is one of the cards. Yes, yes, Hefe, it is still alive. That Lifecrafter's Bestiary. Wow, Link. Lifecrafter's Bestiary is one of the best cards you can have, and this particular deck is running 32 creatures. That's probably more than any other deck in standard right now. So when you bring in your 3 Lifecrafters Bestiaries, you are going to go ham. You're gonna completely just constantly have gas in hand. Nissa Vital Force is going to give you back those cards that they were able to remove. Shaper Sanctuary is going to be really good against those target removals. So you can see that he had good answers here, and pretty much his strategy versus most decks was to just go on that beatdown plan and to make sure that he had plenty of gas to continue that beatdown plan. And that's why you see his sideboard full of Lifecrafter's Bestiaries and Shaper Sanctuaries, Nissa Vital Force, and things like that. So, if you are going to go on that beatdown path, make sure you have some type of draw engine. The main thing that a lot of these decks are doing is trying to out-attrition you. So if you get caught to the point where you're stuck with 0 cards in hand and you're not you don't have options in your deck to start gaining 2 and maybe 3 cards per turn, or at least getting to see an extra card per turn for selection or something, you're going to start falling farther and farther behind, because do understand that the rest of these decks, people who are building good decks, they are putting in value cards that are going to give them, incremental, card advantage over time, and that's something you need to be aware of, and you need to be doing it yourself. So. So much for 1 hour. You're right. Yeah, Val's already come in here and was like, how much time? How much more time you need? But I wanted to cover like all the different decks here. Justin, I know that you had to leave. If you do come back and take a look at this again, I want you to look at the other um, white black deck, and I'm going to be playing one of these. I don't know which one I'm going to play yet, but I definitely want to play one of these white black vehicles decks. Um, they just look fun.
What
So
vehicles do they only run? Why do
hard
they
to
call it
carry.
vehicles? Because it's only that's it.
Well, the deck is based around like cards like Toolcraft Exemplar, which can crew the heart, Scrap Heap Scrounger, which can crew the heart, Knight of Malice, which can crew the heart, Lyra, which can crew. Like these are all like pretty much everything in the deck can crew the heart. So like part of the deck is to just crew heart, swing with heart. So when am I going to run your squee deck? Want to be in chat when I do. Oh man, so that means I need to do yours live instead of pre-recorded. Horde, I will get up with you when I know a more like. It's probably going to be midday. Like, are you going to be around midday tomorrow? I can do it live midday tomorrow, around 4 o'clock tomorrow. Um, so you let me know if that'll work for you, and if so, then I'll just put you in that slot, and I'll do that one live tomorrow at 4. We'll do Horde Squee. All right, cool. Well, that's locked in. Now I know what I'm doing tomorrow. Um, appreciate that. Appreciate that.
Do you have a schedule up, Eric, for the new Patreon?
No, I don't.
I know you told us what you're doing.
Right.
I don't want to over flood you with shit. Like I don't want to just play something that'll just sit in the back burner. I just want to know when I can send it and play it.
One a month, and I will get to it before the end of the month.
Sounds perfect to me.
Like that's
the month. Mine's already been played, so next month is when I'll send.
Right. Like I actually only have like five or six more decks period to run this month, and Magic Hefes is one of those. I'm going to rerun his deck. So yeah, we don't really have that many to go through. I have about 16 to 18 decks per month to run, so we've got a lot of like open space for me to like I don't have to be running more than like 3 or 4 weeks. So I think with the new system and everything, like we can squeeze one in on like a Monday, one on Thursday, or Wednesday or something like that. I can get another one squeezed in some point on the weekend.
I'll just probably send you like 2 at a time. That way, if like if you do it faster than you think you're gonna do, you can just play another one. Hello? Did you just mute, or is that me?
No, I didn't mute. Everybody's gonna get one a month. If I start giving extra one a month, like I'm just not doing it. I'm just not playing extra decks per month unless someone.
I wasn't saying
you're saying like if you had extra time, like if I have extra time, I'm gonna play a tier 1 deck. Like I am currently to the point where I'm playing so many devs decks, I'm playing so many other decks. You realize I haven't played the red green or red black vehicles deck at all, and it has been dominating, but I haven't had time to play it because we've been busy playing all the other decks. Right, like I have not been playing the tier 1 decks, so like the channel's actually technically hurting because I'm not playing the decks that everybody wants to see. Like I should be playing every single top 8 deck that is coming out, but instead I'm playing devs budget decks, and I'm playing like all of these decks from a bunch of different places. Do I have a problem with playing Patreon decks? No, not at all. I signed up for that. I like doing that. But I've got a lot of people that are like, I need you to run my deck again, or my deck didn't do well. Can you play this? Can you do this? People submitting me like 2 and 3 decks, and I'm not just saying you, but people like when I go, if your deck hasn't been played this month, go ahead and send me the list. And then like I've got people sending me their list, and then once I see their list, I'm like, but I played a deck for you 2 weeks ago, and they're like, oh well, when are you going to play this one? And it's like next month. So
I'm not.
I don't have time. Basically, I just don't have time, flat out. There's if I spent like 8 9 hours a day streaming every day, yeah, we could probably get that in. We'd have to break that up. It'd have to be in a lot of different things, but I'm not doing that to my family. I'm just not. I just don't have time, and as of right now, I'm not even getting to play the
I
decks
got
that
it.
everyone wants to see.
I got you, bro.
I want everyone else to get it too, Rush. It's not all about you, bro.
I know, but it feels
And
like
I'm
it's
not
the
even directing this towards you.
Oh, then I'm
Just
good.
why are you so why do you think it's on you, man? Huh? Not everything's about you, Rush.
Oh, a lot of things are about me, homie. Hello?
Oh, I think I just muted. Like what was?
Yeah,
Yeah, I think I just muted. I was saying bring this boy over here. But yeah, I was also saying make sure you have the sorcerer's spyglasses. Make sure that you have ample ways to destroy artifacts. Also, you're going to need more enchantment hate than you have been running in the past. Like, stand up, buddy. Use your legs. Like, use your legs. There we go. Hey, buddy. Hey, he's like, I want to sit down. I want to sit down. I'm like, I'm done. I don't want to stand up. Anyway, crushing canopy is really good if you're in green. Um, Thrashing Brontodon is good. Sorcerer Spyglass is good in every. Like, do I need to say it like 20 more times? Sorcerer Spyglass, Sorcerer Spyglass, Sorcerer's Spyglass. You can call lands. You can call activated abilities of creatures like the Scarab God. You can call any planeswalker you want. Make sure that if you are calling a planeswalker, it's not a planeswalker in your deck. If you're feeling very ambitious and bold, but I don't recommend it, another card that we have not mentioned at all today is the Immortal Sun. You could play that. It is a very good card against the blue-white control deck. However, I don't think you're going to resolve it. So these are all things that you will give up your Patreon spot if I want to run the red black vehicles in leagues. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to run your mono green again. I'm surprised that for the mono green that you guys don't want me to run like this mono green. But yeah, I'm going to run your mono green, Hefe. I've got I've got some other people that I need to rerun for as well. So not Magic Hefe, but Justin Clay's deck. I got in like one game with it, and the opponent just scooped. So I played it in one of the coffee times, and I don't feel that like he hasn't said a word about it, but I just don't feel that I've gave it enough justice when I'm giving a lot of the other decks a little bit more. I am giving each deck about an hour now, so I'm hoping to tune these decks a little bit more. I'm plan on doing most of the Patreon decks off the air, so I'm not going to be trying to do them live unless someone wants to request it live. Like for the Horde wants me to do one of his live, so I'll probably do like one a week live and do the rest recorded. So some people will get that, some people won't, and I don't really have a criteria for how I'm going to be making that choice. So it's just going to be kind of, hey, I'm doing this deck today, and I feel like going live. So that's probably going to happen. But I will say that I'll get the decks played. We will get a chance to look at them. Don't forget, guys, that you can call the deserts, the lands. Like there's a ton of things you can call with the spyglass. Very rarely is it completely dead. Like there is a target in your opponent's deck for it. There is some type of activated ability somewhere. So, like just whether it's crew or Nissa or Lifecraft. No, this would actually be a triggered ability. This is not an activated ability. Whenever you cast a spell, it will trigger. Silent Gravestone has an activated ability. Vraska has an activated ability. Like, I doubt you're going to hit the Silent Gravestone one, but you know, they like even this deck has those things. So, guys, I hope we covered some things that'll help you like fight the meta. Help you at least pick certain cards in your sideboard to help fight against the meta. Wave at them, Link. Say hey. Hey. You gonna wave? Hey. You can do it. Here, let's do this really quick. Look at that. Is that Lincoln? Was that Lincoln? Oh, you like, nope, I'm getting down. All right, all right, guys. It's been a lot of fun, and we'll catch you next time here on Sideboard MTG. I'll be streaming sometime around 8 to 9 o'clock tonight, depending on if I get done with the other stuff I need to get done. Like, coffee time always puts me behind. So we'll see you guys later tonight, and I'm playing a Devs combo deck. Yeah, everyone's wanting to see this Power Stone Shard combo deck. So we're going to be playing that, and I actually hope to make it fairly quick. And I just don't think the deck's going to work. I think people are just
I
going to
think it's
rip,
going to
rip.
be painful to watch.
Yeah, I think people are just going to rip it apart. I don't think it's going to be like Ratsuko good, you know? Like,
Hell no.
the chances of things being Ratsuko good are going to be so slim. That stream
Even
the
if
other night
some
was
of
so
those are,
great.
like, I don't understand. Like, it's just, I mean, it's not as exciting. You know what I mean? Like,
Right,
all those
and
things are more exciting.
it's going to take ages to actually make happen because I have to basically get to the point where each one of them is producing like 14 mana, so I can tap one to make two. And what are you laughing at, Winkin? Huh? I have to tap one to make two, so yeah. And then tomorrow I will be playing for the Horde Squee deck. So, yeah. And then tomorrow
Alright.
night I'm playing something tier 1. And then Thursday I'm also going to play something tier 1, even if Dev puts out another budget deck. Um, like, the budget decks are cool and all, but we are a competitive Magic channel, and I just don't feel they're competitive. Like, the one thing that we could have done, or the two things we could have done to that red white first strike deck would have been put Goblin Chain Whirler and Lyra in it. The third thing that could have definitely been done would have been, let's run like Inspiring Vantage or Cliff Drop Retreats, like, instead of these guaranteed entered tap decks in an aggro deck. Like, so, like, I think that when we're
I
playing
just want to
budget, we're
win.
playing strictly
I just
worse
want to
Magic.
win, man.
So, exactly. Um, Having fun is no excuse for losing. So,
That's it. Go
uh,
take it out of work. Don't be late.
oh yeah, well, work means she goes to the bedroom and gets on her computer.
Oh.
We both work from home.
Oh, that's cool as hell.
Yeah. Um, you see these four walls a lot. But somebody is always here with Mr. Lincoln, and somebody is always there to take care of him. So,
That's cool.
yeah, that was kind of one of the beauties. I wanted to get out of factory work where I watched too many people get their fingers cut off, and I worked there for 9 years, and I still have all 10 of mine. And I was doing a very dangerous job, so yeah, I was tired of the factory work, so I ended up you know, like answering phones, basically. Yeah, hate that. Call center work sucks. Anyway, guys, y'all have fun. We'll see you next time.
Later, bro.